Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us here for our billing webinar on managing billing workflows through Function Point. We are just a minute past the top of the hour, but I'm going to give everyone just a few more minutes to finish logging in. And by a few more minutes, I mean 60 seconds, 1 full minute. So just hold on and we will be starting in shortly. Okay, everybody, let's kick this off. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to be talking about managing your billing workflows just in general as an agency and some of our most common best practices, as well as how we can do that in Function Point. Today is August 19th, 2020. For those of you that were with me on my retainer webinar a couple of weeks ago, I did have the wrong date there, and Jimmy, of course, my co-host, loves to point out when I make small mistakes like that. So I really want to make sure that everyone knows I put in the right date today because I'm very happy about that. So really excited about talking about this topic with you guys today. Next up, my name is Sophia Wilson. So I'm the manager of customer experience here at Function Point. Working closely with our customer success team that helps you guys with all of your workflow and of course just training needs. So anytime there's any questions, never hesitate to reach out to me. I've been with Function Point for a number of years, and I'm sure any of you that have attended webinars in the past know that you definitely have probably talked to me at some point. My co-host today is Jimmy Wu. He's our Director of Sales and Marketing. Jimmy, just wanting to check in. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Thanks again for joining me as you always do. It's always fun to have you on this with me.
No problem. I promise I will keep things light today. So no hard questions from me today.
I
But
know.
that said,
Yeah.
I do want to remind everyone that in your GoToWebinar control panel, there is a questions section. So throughout the webinar, if you do have any questions, just feel free to type it in and I'll do my best to answer them. And if I cannot, I will definitely present them to Sophia, or I feel that it should be shared with everyone, then so everyone can learn from each other.
Jimmy, you
So.
just took what my last slide is. Now I don't need to touch on it. No, I'm kidding. But yes, no, guys, everyone, there is a question section in your GoToWebinar. So please shoot those questions at Jimmy as you go. He loves to throw me the dingers as we're going through the presentation. So please go ahead and ask him. And obviously, if there's anything that is more specific to your workflow that maybe needs a little bit more one-on-one attention, we will direct you to your customer success manager so that we can have those conversations with you as well. So yeah, don't hesitate to shoot those through because, you know, Jimmy needs something to do rather than just listen to my voice this entire time. Okay, great. So for our agenda today, we are going to be going through common billing styles. So obviously through the years of working with different agencies, we have found some of the most common ways that you guys tend to bill. So we're going to talk about those. And then of course, we will talk about those in Function Point and how you are able to manage those within there. We're also going to talk about deposit invoicing. You know, this is always a pretty hot topic. within Function Point, how can we best manage these? Really, what are best practices with it? Everyone always kind of manages taking money upfront in different ways. And really, some of those ways are actually taking a proper deposit, and some of those ways are actually just taking money. So we're going to talk about those a little bit and just create some definitions for you, and then we can talk about the best ways of, based off of your workflow, what would be the most relevant in FP for you. And then we're actually going to talk about how to save time as well. So again, we're going to go through some examples, but within Function Point, there is the ability to create batch invoicing that will help really save you guys a lot of time, as long as the proper organization has been done. So we can definitely make it so that your accountant really doesn't need to spend a whole lot of time in Function Point every single month to go through your billing. So let's get into the common ways to bill in FP. To start, probably one of the biggest ways that I see a lot of our agencies work is through fixed price. So fixed price is any kind of fixed dollar amount that has been agreed upon between you and your client. And normally this would start with the job being predefined, what kind of work is going to be done, how much it is that the client will be paying to you. And obviously, if you go above and beyond what that agreement was, it's probably costs that you are then going to have to eat because of that. So this is definitely a pretty common way I do see agencies bill. Not always the most profitable, but if you run a pretty tight ship and you are able to see, common ways that items are being managed and making sure that they are efficient with your staff, it can also be quite profitable if you're able to also keep it under that amount. So we're going to talk about how we can bill for that fixed price. Now, this is something that I have seen a lot of different agencies also bill for slightly differently within that fixed price. If it's a larger piece of work, maybe 100K or something, it may be something that is billed incrementally throughout the life cycle of that job. It could be an agreement that to complete it, you're going to take half, maybe like a quarter up front, a quarter in the middle, and then the rest of it at the end. So again, that will be a part of whatever your agreement is with your client, but in the end, it will always be that final 100 grand. Next, of course, is the retainer. So any of you that maybe attended our retainer webinar a couple of weeks ago, we definitely dive a lot more into retainers themselves and how to build for them and manage them within that webinar. So if you're interested, I would highly recommend taking a look at that one. But usually a retainer would be a set amount that would be paid monthly for defined or undefined work. Again, completely depends on what your agreement is with your client. But similar to fixed price, it's usually going to stick to that dollar amount that has been agreed upon and paid every month. Next, we have time and material. So time material is also extremely common. This would be for all actuals that are tracked to the work and are billed for. So this would be any timesheets that your staff have tracked against this. And then of course, any like external expenses, anything third-party vendors that you are also having to track against this. Normally, as you are creating that relationship or scoping for this work, you would still estimate for this with your client so that they have an idea of where you expect this to come in. But of course, scopes can always change. A client may have a different expectation on something. And if you were to go above and beyond, this is a great way to make sure that you don't have to eat those costs if there are some unknown obstacles that tend to hit. And then of course, the final one is combo billing. So as much as we would all love to be able to sit in one of these like very special containers and only ever bill for this, we know that there are always going to be times where things are not the same and you may need the ability to do combo billing. So it could be a combination of actuals and fixed. I've worked with some agencies where what they do is they'll always have a fixed amount for when it comes to the internal hours that their staff will work on their jobs. However, if there's any third party or external expenses that cause them to go above and beyond what they have agreed upon with their clients, then those they would charge back. So they would need the ability to be able to do that combo billing. Now, before I move on, Jimmy, I just want to check in. Are there any questions or anything you'd like to add at all about any of these definitions?
No, I think that was good. I think we can keep going.
Okay.
I don't see any questions yet, though.
Don't see any questions yet. Okay. Hopefully it's not like
I'm sure
last
they'll
time where those.
come later on.
We also had a hiccup a few weeks ago with another webinar where none of the questions were coming through. So guys, if anyone can just shoot Jimmy a message so we can make sure that those questions are coming through, we would also greatly appreciate that. We want to make sure no questions are getting missed. Okay, so let's dive into deposit invoicing. Now, deposit invoicing, this is designed for proper accrual-based accounting. So any accountants that are on the line right now that practice proper accrual-based accounting will know what I'm talking about here. So any of accrual-based accounting is really any set dollar amount that would be taken up front and held in a liability account to then be recognized throughout the life cycle of that job upon invoicing. So in many cases, and if we were to go to some of the most basic ways of doing this, it would be in a case where maybe you would take 50% of, again, that agreed upon dollar amount for your work, just so that you also have that reassurance that there will be money coming in later. However, in say your QuickBooks or whatever accounting tool you use outside of Function Point, that money would actually be held in a liability account and not actually recognized until your work begins. So, it's definitely a great way of doing your billing. However, again, there are cases where I have worked with quite a few agencies, and a big common question that I ask is, they say, okay, how do we work with deposits? How do I, set this up? And the first question I actually ask them is, okay, do you plan on putting this in a liability account, or are you actually recognizing this income immediately? And in cases where you are recognizing that income immediately, what we would recommend is actually just doing a basic invoice, because you won't actually be then applying that dollar amount against future invoices to remove those costs for your client from future invoices. And again, I'm going to show you this when we get into Function Point itself, but it's just something that I really always like to just stress. If you're not practicing like actual accrual-based accounting, then I wouldn't recommend using deposits within FP. Because it's just not really going to be useful for you. Also with this, with our QuickBooks integration, again, deposits, the integration will again cause it to go into a liability account in your QB, and as you create future invoices and apply those deposits against it, it will then take those amounts appropriately through QB with the integration as well. Okay, great. Again, Jimmy, before we move on to the next slide, just checking in one more time. Any questions that came from this or anything you'd like to add?
There were lots of test questions that came in, so it does work. So I'm glad to see that. We do have a question about combination billing. So, but I'm sure once you go through that, more questions will come. So cool.
Okay, great. Thank you everyone for testing that with us. We really appreciate it. I'm sure Jimmy's super thankful right now. Okay, great. And then saving time in FP. This is obviously a big one. Lots of agencies I work with, they come to me and they're like, okay, like we're growing, we're getting busier, which is great, but our normal workflow of only needing to say create 10 to 15 invoices a month isn't working anymore. And our accountant is starting to want to pull out her hair and starting to get stressed. So with that, we are able to do batch invoicing within FP. And we'll walk you through a quick workflow of that today as well. A huge part of being able to do batch invoicing though is making sure that you organize your jobs appropriately so that it is an easy search for your accountant to be able to at any point pull all of your fixed price or time material jobs at a single time, so that they can then just bill for all of those at once. So something I always like to say to people when, again, I'm working with them is I always want you to think about what your end goal is. How do you want to invoice later? So if you want to be able to utilize batch invoicing, then let's make sure that we organize and create your jobs appropriately so that that is easy to do. Because you know, there's definitely times where I have spoken with people and they're like, oh yeah, I want to be able to create a batch invoice now. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, none of it's been set up. And really all this is going to do is set you up for failure to do it incorrectly and allow for human error. So I'm going to show you guys what we recommend as a field as you're creating those initial jobs that make it super easy for later on. And again, we can make some adjustments to actually work best for your workflow specifically. Jimmy, I thought I heard some rustling in the background there. Any questions at all?
That's just me moving around trying to go like, okay, let's get this going. And now I'm curious, excited to
You're ready
listen
for
more.
me to you're ready for me to get out of my slides? Okay, great. Okay, well then last but not least, obviously Jimmy is answering your questions in the background as we go through today. But you know, if in the middle of the night tonight something comes up, you realize that maybe you didn't have an example that you needed really covered today, don't hesitate ever to reach out to our success team at success@functionpoint.com. When you email this email, you'll actually have access to the entire team. And we'll all be available to connect with you and make sure that you have your questions answered. A huge part of the success team is, of course, making you successful. So don't ever hesitate to reach out with your questions and we'll be here to help. Okay, great. So on that note, let's just dive into FP now. I'm going to get rid of these slides. So as we come into Function Point itself, obviously, again, as we're here, we have now landed on the dashboard. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with it. So I'm going to actually start by just talking about the setup of jobs just right off the bat, and then I'm going to go into how it is that we can utilize it for batch invoicing later. But just as we're going through this, I want to make sure that we touch on that kind of as our first aspect. So again, big question I always ask when I am getting on the phone with a client is, how do you invoice? Like, what are your end goals? Let's make sure we set this up. So when you are originally creating a new estimate and you land on your add estimate page, of course, some of you are probably going to see that this looks a little bit different than yours. This is a big part of creating estimates within FP, is obviously some of these services and service groups. This is probably where you see the most change. But this category field here, and I really can't stress this enough. I think I actually talked about it quite a lot on our last webinar as well, just in regards to retainers. But this is the field that I always recommend. Utilize this to talk about how you plan on billing for your work later on. So in this drop down here, we have this preset here in our FP. This is my demo system with just the most common ways I see estimates and invoices being created. However, you may see a different drop down based off your workflow, your terminology, and what you actually need. But you're going to see in here, I have my monthly retainers, I have my time material, I have my fixed price, and I have my quarterly retainers. So these are all the different ways that I know I need to bill at the start of every month. I need to bill for all my monthly retainers. On the 6th maybe of every month, I know I need to bill for all my time material. And of course, maybe on the 2nd, I bill for all my fixed price. Quarterly, of course, at the start of every quarter, I'm gonna go ahead and do that too. If while you are analyzing this and talking about the different ways that you invoice, either with your owner or your accountant, all of this can be adjusted through the list maintenance in the back end of your system. So that's just through admin. I did not mean to do that. It's through admin, system setup, and list maintenance here. So never hesitate to go back in there. That is every drop down in the system that can be edited is available for you in there to be able to update and edit. Okay, great. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to just go through a basic invoice and the creation of it, and I'm going to speak towards what you need to do to adjust each invoice as we go through so that you can actually tackle each of the different items as well as the fixed price, time material, and this combo billing for yourself. Just because, again, all of you should know how to create these invoices. If maybe you aren't sure how to really go about doing that, please, again, reach out to the success team. We're here to help you. For our example today, I'm just going to come into this logo development, and actually, no, we're going to come into the travel kit, new package design. So in here, something I always recommend, please come in, do a review of your jobs before you go ahead and invoice, especially if you're doing something like time and material. You're going to want to make sure that your staff are coming in and all of the correct time is put in, because you're going to want to make sure that you invoice for that on time and that you're not going to need to roll maybe time from August into your September invoice because something was missed. So it is still good to make sure that your management team is doing reviews of all the work and that all of your staff are tracking time accordingly. You know, I can't stress enough that people really need to stay on top of time tracking. Not that I'm the best at it, but I definitely make sure I always stay on top of my team tracking time, because it's just such a key piece to really know how you guys are doing and how profitable you are, and it's, yeah, it's just really important. So if you were to come in, do a little bit of a review. The financials page is probably one of my personal favorites. You can come in and you can see what you estimated versus where all your actuals are at. Now, something you're going to notice here about this job is that there actually already are invoices that have been created for it. It's because of the fact that this job, if I come underneath the basic info, I can actually see oh, sorry, on the estimate, I can see that it was originally created as a time and materials job. So I know I'm always going to invoice based off of time material. So if I go back to that job details, underneath financials, again, you're going to see what we estimated, where the actuals are at, and what has been invoiced for so far. So if at this point I wanted to do a quick review, I could look at where we are at for the month of August by filtering these dates, and I can see all the time that has actually been put in up to this point. So we have some non-billable time that's been put in here. We also have production and coordination time that's been put in. Yeah, so what I want to make sure is that we are actually invoicing for these hours. And then what I'm going to actually quickly do is I'm going to quickly put an external expense against this as well, so that I can show you guys how we can go about doing that too. We're going to just save that. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and create the invoice. So basic way of doing this is coming up here to add new and add invoice. So just for everyone's knowledge, this is just a single invoice we are creating right now. But of course, we're going to go through that batch invoicing in a little bit. So I always just like to quickly define these items up here for us as well. So we've got 3 different types of invoicing here in Function Point. We've got deposit, we've got interim, and we have final. Again, deposit invoicing, that is just for accrual-based accounting. It would be taking a dollar amount up front. At this point, what we're going to want to do is create interim or final invoices throughout the life cycle of this job. An interim invoice is just an invoice that can be created at any time, and it allows for the job to continue to stay open and work to continue to be done, and allow you to invoice again multiple times throughout it. A final invoice is very similar to an interim, same style. However, what it will do is it will put the job into a status of invoiced, therefore closing or locking the job so that people can no longer track time or expenses against it. Now, there are some back-end features that we can set for you as well. If you maybe still need to track some expenses later on to that job, we can allow for it to actually continue to track up to 60 days past a close date for the job. But again, not usually best practice, but if you need anything like that, we can. For the invoice name, it will automatically just grab your job name. If you are doing incremental billing and billing at different times, I usually do recommend put the date into the invoice name for yourself, just so that you can track it a little bit differently, as well as on the invoice printout later, it will show a little bit differently, and your client will be able to see that. Of course, the invoice numbers will be different, so they'll be able to see it through that way as well, but it's just never a bad idea. The next bit is this invoice date. So this is when I do always feel the need to stress a little bit, again, depending on the type of invoicing you are doing. So with invoice dates is it will pull, especially if you are doing time material, all invoices and expenses that have been tracked against that job up to this date. So if you know and have an agreement with your client that on the first of every month, you are going to be invoicing them for all time material that had been done the month before, from, say, if we're creating this invoice for August 1st, and we need to bill for everything that was from July 1st to July 31st, you will actually want to backdate this invoice. Because we're on the 19th right now, maybe something happened, we're running behind on our invoicing, but we would need to actually backdate this to, say, August 1st to make sure that we only capture those invoices. Now, what you're going to see has happened is this bit of information down here has changed for us. Because I changed this date to August 1st, we now have 0 uninvoiced timesheets, 0 uninvoiced internal expenses, and 0 uninvoiced external expenses as well. Where if I come back to the 19th, you're going to see that this has changed again, because we have 4 uninvoiced timesheets and 1 uninvoiced external expense up to this point. So we know that for time material work, I would want to make sure that all of this is invoiced for. So that's why this date is actually really important, making sure that you are lining up. The number of times I've had agencies actually come to me and be like, my invoicing is completely messed up. I don't know why these timesheets were captured on this one rather than on the invoice that I was needing to do here. And the first thing I come and look at is this invoice date, and I see that maybe they had been creating their invoices on the 6th of the month and they didn't backdate it. So then those timesheets that had been created between the 1st and the 6th were captured on the wrong invoice. So I just really like to stress that this is important for you to change if you are not invoicing on the date that you need to be invoicing by. Great. Next up, we have our calculated from item here. So within here, there are a number of options. For our examples today, I usually recommend sticking to the estimate, actuals, or none. Estimated is how you would go about capturing the right data for all of your fixed price. If it is a fixed price piece of work, that you would normally have estimated for everything to come to that dollar amount that you are fixed to charging your client for. So it would probably be a pretty easy process of coming into estimated, invoicing for that amount or a percentage of that amount, and sending off that invoice, where the actuals would be based off of, again, all that time material. For the actuals, we want to make sure that just these timesheets and the external expense is being captured, and that's all we want to invoice for. If you are going based off that estimated for a fixed price, again, if you have an agreement that you're going to do 50% in the middle and then 50% at the end, you'll then want to just make sure that you add in that 50% at that billing percentage section here to make sure that you only invoice for that amount. I'm going to go based off of actuals today and show this time material. So then, of course, last but not least is, of course, that tax group. All of your taxes will be set up in the back end of your system. And what you can do is you can either choose your tax group at this stage, or if you know that based off of where your client's location is, you can actually pre-apply those taxes to be against that company so that when you create invoices for them, it will automatically always just pull it for you. Before I go to the next page, Jimmy, just wanting to check in. Any questions on this at all?
Yeah, there was a question around the invoice number, and this one's from Shelly. So when you create an invoice, it starts with the number 0. Is there a way to start the invoice with the number 1? Or if there's a way to customize the invoice number?
So is this in the case where it is the job number -0 or just the number 0? So they're
-0, sorry.
-0. Yeah. Yeah, good question, Shelly. No, not that I'm aware of. That may be something we may need to talk to our development team if it's something that we can do special for you. But there are 2 ways of invoice number creation in FP. It is either the job number -0 to -1 to -2, or it is just sequential numbering, which would start at 1 and work its way up. So again, that's depending on what your needs are. Let's maybe talk more one-on-one about that, but that is the 2 main ways of being able to create invoice numbers in FP.
Great. The other question that occurred was what remainder from actuals represent?
Remainders from actual. So really good question. So these remainders from actuals and estimated, they can be really useful when used correctly. So the remainder from actuals, in a case where you are coming in, and I'm going to show you this on the next page, and maybe making edits to some of your timesheets or external expenses because maybe you need to invoice for only a certain amount on a specific invoice, but at the end of the job, you want to make sure that you still actually bill for all time material. You can use this amount to make sure that any uninvoiced dollar amounts can be captured from those timesheets or expenses. So again, I'm always cautious using this. I am a huge advocate for making sure that you are billing all of your actuals each and every single month and not doing a lot of manipulation, just because it does cause space for human error and dollars may be getting missed. But this remainder from actuals, if in a case where maybe you have been doing that manipulation, but again, you know that you need to invoice for everything, you can pull this and it will pull all dollar amounts against all timesheets and expenses that haven't technically been invoiced for yet at that point. That is also the same for the remainder from estimated. So if you have been doing incremental billing based off that estimated amount, and if there is a dollar amount that has not been used quite yet, you can also use that remainder from estimated as well at this stage. Jimmy, is there anything that you would add there? I know that that one can be a little bit of like a tricky one to sort of explain at times.
No, I think that makes sense. I think we can keep going. Take some time to answer a few other questions in the meantime.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, great. So once you've created your invoice, again, it's now going to bring you to our standard just invoice page. I had wanted to go through each and every single creation of each invoice for you guys today, but we're starting to run out of time. So I'm going to just talk towards how we can do whatever manipulation is needed on this one page. So again, in this case, for what we have been doing so far, we wanted to bill for everything that was actuals up to this time. So as you go through, you're going to see this invoiced slot here, and this is where you're going to see what is being invoiced for. Things that cannot be edited are the ones that have actuals against it. So you'll remember that this is a non-billable item, so that's why there's $0 against it there for you. We also had the production here, which is 800, and coordination, which is 200. And if you need to, you can expand and actually see those different timesheets that were applied there, how many hours they were at what rate. You do, and again, this is coming back to that question around all those remainders. If you needed to edit this one timesheet because for some reason you're going to only invoice $600 for this, you could override this so that you only bill for $600 worth of this timesheet. But again, best practice, you don't want to leave any money on the table there, guys. Do the full amount. Don't mess with your timesheets, especially if you're going to do time and material. Bill for what you've done, because that is what your agreement is, right? If that's not going to be the case, then I would suggest doing fixed price. So you will be able to come in here and actually view all those different items. And then of course, that external expense that we had created there for that $3,600 with its markup there. So now in cases where, again, we're talking about more that fixed price amount, you're gonna actually, and for those of you that maybe don't know, these column headers are editable for you. So if you needed to, you could actually come and click on that estimated amount. What it's gonna then do for you is pull through what you had originally estimated for, and that's now gonna be your dollar amount on this invoice. So obviously that's going to change this quite drastically now to 13 grand that we plan on invoicing for. Well, 13,027.40 cents. And you now have the ability, again, to make any edits that you need here as well. So in cases where maybe you're wanting to do incremental billing, maybe you wanted to do that 50%, you can either choose to calculate this yourself, or what we have up here is the ability to make some edits as well. So maybe if we know now at this point that we have created a problem, we needed 50% from estimated, and I'm going to reset this. and we are going to submit the changes. We're gonna reset that again one more time. Sometimes you just need to click save at the bottom to actually have it go through. Sorry, everyone. It looks like my Wi-Fi is getting a little bit funny here and it is causing a little bit of issues. But what you would be able to do is when you click that reset, it should automatically calculate this for you as you are going through. So I'm going to need to look into why that is not doing that automatically for me right now and do a little bit of investigation on that. But that is how that should work. Also, again, in these cases where you now are doing that combo billing, again, all of these columns here are now editable for you. So maybe in these cases, again, where we're going to bill for everything that we had estimated for when it comes to our time. But what we want to make sure we do is that in the external expenses, we want to make some adjustments here. So although we had estimated for that $3,600 and the actuals are at $3,600, we know that for right now, we're going to want to override that to $4,000 for this too, because things are changing up a little bit. So again, this page, this is where you can now make those changes. If you are doing combination billing, probably doing each invoice one by one is going to be your best bet so that you have the ability to make these edits as needed. And of course, whenever you're ready, you would be able to click save. And then you would be able to either then notify your client directly through the system or go ahead and click print, download that PDF and send it off. Okay, great. I'm seeing some hands pop up over there, Jimmy. Any questions that you want to make sure we touch on screen?
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
So just there were a question from Susan to review if we'll be reviewing invoice against the company level on a retainer or to a job. And then the other question that popped up a couple of times is on deposit invoice. So how when creating a deposit either on a project or a company level, how we can apply that to the jobs, and then also how that talks to QuickBooks as well.
Yeah, definitely. So we're definitely going to talk about deposit invoices. Retainer invoicing, we're not going to be talking about that. Unfortunately, Susan, again, we did do a webinar a few weeks ago specifically on retainers, so probably recommend taking a peek at that one. But yeah, we're about to dive into retainer invoices and then how we can use that on your invoice later on. So why don't we dive right into that? Again, any other questions on this page before we go ahead and do that though, Jimmy? Nope, your silence says it all. Okay, great. So let's dive into deposit invoicing. So something about deposit invoicing that I always like to say to a group is think about the hierarchy that your deposit needs to be used at. Because the thing with an interim or final invoice is that it does need to be against a job specific, where a deposit invoice, because it is a dollar amount and you don't necessarily know where it's going to be used, it can actually be applied at a job level, it can be applied at a project level, and it can be applied at a company level for yourself, depending on if you know where it's going to be used. So if your agreement is with a client that, like, again, 10K or something that you're about to take on is going to be for a specific piece of work, then you would want to make sure that you apply that deposit at the job level. If you know that it's going to be kind of a larger scope, there could be a lot of different moving pieces. You don't necessarily know what each piece is going to be as you go through, but you know that it is going to, again, be for some form of set deliverables. I would probably apply it at a project level. However, there are cases where I've worked with some agencies that maybe work in like a nonprofit or government sector, and they'll be given a large amount at the beginning of the year that they know will come for any kind of work that could be coming down the pipeline. So they don't know where it's going to go. So they would actually track it against the company level for later on. to be used as work is then requested of them. So let's go through that example of doing it at the company level today. So I'm going to go to Great Atlantic Insurance. Again, when you land on a company page, you're always going to see everything that's kind of going on here for yourself. And you're going to see that there are no deposits living against here quite yet. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add new. We're going to add an invoice. And we're now going to change this to a deposit amount. You're going to notice a lot of the other options have moved away because it's quite a bit less information that is needed here. It really is for just a set dollar amount because we don't know where this is going to need to be applied to in the future. So we know that we're invoicing them on the 19th. We've got our set dollar amount. Maybe we'll do it for $10,000. You're also going to notice that the tax group here has populated. Again, depending on what your accounting practices are, this is completely up to you on how you want to work. But in Function Point, I usually recommend not applying your taxes at this level. Usually when accounting, you would just accept, oh, and I meant for this to be 10 grand, not 100K, take that dollar amount and it would be the taxes that would be applied to the services later on, because then you know what has been done and you will know what is actually taxable work or not. So for this, again, I usually recommend leaving this blank, and then it also allows you to apply this dollar amount again against any futuristic jobs. In Function Point, your taxes, you either have to have no taxes against a deposit to be able to apply it to any invoice in the future, or your deposit invoice and your interim or final invoice have to have the same taxes applied against them. So just something that I always like to just kind of iterate here for yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add this invoice. You're then going to land on, again, this is now your deposit invoice page. It looks a lot different than that standard invoice page that we had just been looking at because of the fact that, again, this dollar amount isn't going against each different service or expense or anything that you have. This is really just that overview page allowing for yourself to see that we have that deposit subtotal of $10,000 with the integration with QuickBooks. You'll need to define what your AR account is, but all of this should be preset in the back end of your system. Usually with QuickBooks, if you are utilizing that integration, you will then enter your payment information on the QB side, and when you sync later, that information will come back for you. I'm not going to go through the QuickBooks integration process right now, so I'm just going to say that this has now been paid for $10,000, again, on the payment date of today, because we issued it and collected it all at the same time. If you have payment notes or invoice description that you're wanting to put through, you can enter all of this on this page. And then, of course, whenever you're done, you can click submit, and this has now been saved in Function Point for you. We can go back to Great Atlantic Insurance, or Jimmy, before I change screens again, any questions at all?
No, I just wanted to, I know there were a few others that also asked about, just wanted to also look at batch invoicing. So just want to make sure to see if we have time for that after this.
I definitely want to make time for it. So again, I know everyone, we usually try and keep this webinar around 45 minutes. I hope you're okay if we go over a little bit, just so I can show you easy ways of being able to do that. I've just gotten away with myself with talking today, so I do apologize for that. But let's quickly show you guys this. So we're going to go back to Great Atlantic Insurance. You will now see that this deposit tab has been highlighted here. So under here, we can see that subtotal of 10 grand total. None of it has been applied yet, and it has been paid, so there is no outstanding balance on it. So if we were to come back again underneath one of these jobs, I'm going to go to this corporate website here that we have for this, which is open. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add an invoice. We're going to do it based off of estimated here. I'm going to add that invoice. So we know right away that estimated, we have 26K. Actually, you know what? We're going to do this so that we're going to do it based off of actuals, clear that out. So we've got about $2,900 here. And you're going to now see this less deposit option here. So this deposit invoice that we had created just now for that $10,000, I know that I want to use that amount to actually remove from this 26. I'm going to save that, and now you can see that this invoice total has zeroed itself out. I can save this. Oh, and just because of my integration, anything else? No. We're going to go ahead and save. And now this invoice has been saved for you. You can see that there's no outstanding balance on it because of that $10,000 item that we had done. If we go ahead and print this, we just do summary view, you would be able to send this off to your client, and you'll be able to see that less deposit amount, so that that total due is 1. That is incorrect because it should be $0. So I will need to look at that as well today. Okay, great. So yes, so you can now see that maybe I must have typed that in wrong. That's definitely my fault there, folks. But again, that less deposit amount there for you has removed that from here, so that you know that this invoice has been adjusted for you. Okay, any questions at all, folks? Jimmy, anything coming in? Okay, great. So on that,
no, I don't think there are questions. I just want to say that the deposit invoice, if you create it on a company level, it will also work as well, whether you create that deposit on company or project level. The only difference being that project level deposit is applied to the jobs within that project, whereas company level deposit can be applied to all jobs within that client.
Jimmy, were you not listening to me when I described all of that earlier?
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
You know what? A lot of questions. So I'm trying to. Anyways.
I'm totally giving you crap. No, but Jimmy, again, really good thing to reiterate. We had created, again, this deposit originally at the company level so that at any point I could use it for any job or project in the future. But it's really important to remember, what's your agreement with your client? Is the deposits that you're taking needing to be for specific deliverables? If so, make sure those deposits are applied at that level. If not, then I usually recommend applying them at the company level so that you can use them for anything in the future. But again, we're starting to run out of time, so I want to make sure that we quickly touch on how to create batch invoices for any of these scenarios. So for that, you'd actually be able to come up here under jobs and find jobs. And again, utilizing that drop down that I had suggested at the very start of that category for you, you can come in here and actually search by these individual items. So again, if we're maybe going based off of fixed price today, we always know that it's going to be that fixed price amount. We're on the day that your account will come into Function Point and pull up all of those jobs. You can actually go ahead and find active based off of that specific dollar, based off of that category for you. So in here, I know that we have 13 active jobs that we bill for that fixed price at different stages of the workflow, and I know that I want to create a batch invoice for all 13 of these jobs. So when you land on this job list, again, depending on what you need to review, you may want to just take a look at some of these financials. You have the ability to manage those columns to make sure that you are looking at the details that you need to look at or that are relevant before invoicing. But when you are ready, you're going to notice this Add Invoice button up here in the top right hand, which is going to bring you into our batch invoicing process. So what you'll see is these invoice types, again, interim or final. If you know that all these jobs actually need to be finalized and closed out, you can change it to a final invoice, which will then change all of these job statuses into a status of invoice and lock them as well. So if that is part of your process and you want to make sure that no one can track any actuals against it following that, you do have that ability. So the batch name, that's just going to pull today's date, and you'll be able to see on the printouts that it will just pull today's date for you. Again, invoice date, if you need to backdate it, you have that ability. And again, because we're going off of fixed price, I'm going to keep that calculated from at estimated today. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create this batch invoice. This brings you again to your first page within your batch invoice. This is where you can make maybe any adjustments that you need to add on, any payment notes, to all of the different invoices that you have, your accounts receivable, tax groups, again, anything that you need. All of this should be preset for you, however, through your QuickBooks integration. So in most cases, you should just be able to go ahead, add jobs to batch. And this will now take you to your adding the jobs page. So by default, we're not going to assume that you do want to invoice for every single one of them. There could be cases where you know that maybe you just need to invoice for the top 5. And again, in cases where maybe you are actually billing based off time material, if you hover over this, you're going to be able to see that there are, say, 25 uninvoiced timesheets for this specific job. And again, you need to go through, do your review, and only click on those that had actuals against it. But since we're doing this for all of our fixed price items, I'm actually going to come in, I'm going to click Add All. And this is now going to add every single one of these jobs into your batch invoicing for yourself. So again, we're going to see what had been estimated, where those actuals are at, and how much is being invoiced for, and how much has previously been invoiced for. And it will also give you the total for yourself for all 13 uninvoiced timesheets. Now, again, in cases where you're maybe doing some of that combo billing or edits need to be made, you do have the ability to come in and click the edit pencil along here, which then will bring you onto that page similar to when we were doing a single one earlier. And you can make those edits as needed. So you do have those capabilities to still come in and make those edits. But usually I do recommend, if you're going to be doing some manipulation to your invoicing, do it one-on-one. Just again, we don't want any human error to kind of kick in at all. Normally, I would say if you know that you're only invoicing based off of what's been estimated, pull all of these accordingly, go ahead, add these into your batch, and then you would be able to go and finish adding to batch all at once. By default, the system will just pull the first one of those 13, but if you needed to check out the rest of them, again, you would, because each of these invoices are specific for different companies, you're going to notice that with your printing, it's only going to allow you to pull one printout at a time. Which is great. You will send these out all individually, but underneath the batch, this is then where you will be able to see each and every single one of those invoices that were created in that batch. You'll be able to see the status of it if it has been posted into your QuickBooks or not. And then of course, this notification option here as well. So any of you that are using our email out of function point notification capabilities, you would be able to pick which ones may need to be sent out, and you can either choose notify client overall or notify selected as well if you needed to maybe remove some. And then of course we have the ability to post all of them all here at once as well, rather than doing it all separately. So again, a lot of that workflow can be done in bulk when you're doing the batch invoicing. Okay, I feel like I zoomed through that pretty quickly there. Jimmy, questions, concerns, anything else we kind of want to add in so that we can utilize sort of these last 7 minutes for any questions that have come through that maybe other people would need to know about?
Sure. So, so one of the question was about batch posting all of the invoices here into QuickBooks in one go instead of one by one. So just want to make sure when we click on that post invoice, are you saying that all the invoices in this list from invoice number 146 to, I guess, 156 will all be sent to QuickBooks?
Correct. They should all be sent to QuickBooks to the respective companies. And if there are any errors that pop up, again, that status, you'll be able to see it at this level to be able to go and review that error message.
Okay, got it. And when they batch invoice, can they take out jobs or projects that they don't want to invoice on the batch? That's one of the questions from Jennifer.
Yes, so Jennifer, I unfortunately can't backtrack on where I am with this page, but on that page earlier when I was reviewing and adding in jobs, yes, you can pick and choose which ones you want to add in.
Sounds good. Another question from Keaton is there a way to recover deleted invoices? We have had, so yeah, is there a way to recover invoices that were deleted So question on that one.
So Keaton, unfortunately, if something's been deleted out of function point, it's gone. We have set up quite a few precautions and warnings before anything can be deleted. You should probably receive at least one pop-up because again, once something has been removed from function point, it has been deleted.
Okay, thank you. The other question is, can you just quickly review in the batch invoicing the difference of how you can create a single invoice with multiple jobs or projects in it, or maybe just a separate invoice for each job and project?
Yeah, so the one we just did is separate invoices for separate jobs. What you can do is create a single multi-job invoice, which would need to be for, so if we were to do again a job find here, and maybe I wanted to search by everything for maybe Great Atlantic Insurance, because we've been using them a lot today. Some items that are required for the different types of batch invoicing is that you can only create a single multi-job invoice for anything that is underneath a specific company, because you obviously can't create multiple invoices for you can't create one invoice for multiple companies. It can only be one invoice for one company, but you can associate multiple jobs into that one invoice. Or there is multiple jobs for multiple companies, which is really just creating single invoices in a bulk way, which was what we just previously went through. So in a case like this, where I have our company, Great Atlantic Insurance, we actually have 7 active jobs for them. I'd be able to come up here underneath add invoice, and this is where you're going to see these different batching options. We've got the single multi-job invoice, or we've got the multiple invoices in a batch. So for this, I know I just want to send Great Atlantic Insurance just a single invoice for yourselves to be able to, it would just be one sheet. They would be able to see it. They'd be able to review it. Again, we're going to just keep it based off of our estimated today. I'm going to go ahead and add invoice. I'm not going to worry about changing anything here because this should all be preset. Again, coming back to Jennifer's question, this is the page where you can actually pick and choose which ones you want to invoice for. So if I only wanted to do a couple, I could go ahead and do that. Or again, I can go ahead and add all, and it will add in all 7 invoices onto this. You can do your financial review on what it is that you need, maybe make any edits that are needed. We can go ahead and finish adding to the batch here. Again, you're going to be able to see all of the different jobs that are in here. Because again, now this is a single invoice for Great Atlantic Insurance, you're going to notice that not each invoice is postable separately. It's just post that invoice to your accounting package singularly. And then of course that printout is going to look a little bit different, where it is now listing out each of those 7 jobs for yourselves with its cost onto a single printout. And again, printouts are editable through printing preferences. So if you don't like the way this looks, we can definitely make some changes for you in your system specifically. Okay, we have about a minute left. Jimmy, any other like burning questions that you think we should make sure we tackle, or is there anything that you feel like I've missed today?
No, I don't think so. I think you did a great job, so thank you for doing that. I just want to let everyone know that after, as always, we will be sending out the recording of this webinar afterwards, and we'll also attach some of the help articles that will take you step by step on how you can create a batch invoice versus deposit invoice versus the QuickBooks integration. So we'll include those in the follow-up email afterwards so that you can have quick access to them.
Yeah, definitely. And this is always a really big topic, talking about billing. There's lots of different workflows. If you found that none of these are really going to work for you today, again, don't hesitate to reach out to the success team so we can maybe talk with you more specifically around what your needs are. This is a huge piece of Function Point, and of course integrating then with QuickBooks. So it's important to make sure that you get it right. But I think some of the most important things to ask yourself, like coming out of this webinar, is of course, like, how do you bill? Do you actually practice accrual-based accounting? Do you need deposits? And of course, like, how can we make sure that these are set up so that you can utilize things like some of our batch invoicing for the future. So just important things to sort of think about for yourself. And if you aren't the accountant, but you're going to go away and actually have a conversation with your accountant, just ask them about their processes, ask them what would make their lives easier, and hopefully we'll be able to help you set that up.
Cool.
Okay, great.
Sophia, I guess before we end the webinar, could you
Yeah.
please, because there's a few questions around the QuickBooks syncing on batch invoices. So is it
Sorry, Jimmy, I think I lost you there.
Oh, yeah, can you take a few minutes to explain the batch invoices and how they go into QuickBooks when we post them? Does it go in one by one? Does it go in all fell swoop, or can you control it? Just that part.
Yeah, for sure. Again, it really depends on what you folks need. If we've done the batch invoicing where it's single jobs, and you just want those going over, you do have the ability, again, on that previous page that we had looked at. If we go under here and we would go underneath the batch, again, if you click the post invoices, it will send them all over in one fell swoop. If you want to make sure you're only doing it individually, then you can actually just click this post invoice, which will only send invoice 146 over for yourself. So it really depends on what you need. We can do it however it is that you maybe really need. That's a big one, Jimmy. I think the QuickBooks integration, that's going into a whole new bucket of worms that I don't think we want to tackle on this webinar.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Then we'll definitely make sure to do our best to reach out to you guys and see if, and also include those in our help articles afterwards. One last question, sorry, excuse me, is when they do batch invoices, but then they have a mix of both final and interim invoices, should they be doing 2 batches of invoices in that scenario?
Oh, good question. I probably would, again, just to avoid any human error, because when you're creating those batches and when you're on that edit page, you would be required to click into each one individually and make sure that you are like closing them, like changing the status. So again, I find it just gets a little bit more irritating. Probably what I would do is do 2 separate batches and batch invoice for all of my final ones, and then I would do another one for all my interim ones. But that's just me being OCD. So it completely depends on what you think would be easier for yourselves.
Right. Sounds
okay.
Good.
Any other dingers you want to send at me there, Jim?
No, I don't think so. I think we're good here.
Okay, great. Well then, again, thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I do apologize that I spoke a little bit more than I had intended to. Again, this is a really big topic to cover in 45 minutes, but we will be hosting another webinar in another few weeks, so please keep your eyes peeled for the announcement on that. And then, of course, the follow-up email that will include the recording and as well as a few other bits of content to be able to help you guys with your billing. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to the success team at success@functionpoint.com. And yeah, again, thanks for joining and thanks for being my co-host, Jimmy. It's always a pleasure to work with you on the webinars.
Sounds good. No problem. Pleasure's all mine. Thanks, Sophia.
Okay, thanks, guys. Bye.